Hi, I'm Brad Dacus.
And I'm Kyle Campbell.
Welcome to Faith and Law.
We're breaking down political and legal issues of the day through a biblical lens.
On today's show, we're going to talk about the freedom of speech and the challenges to the freedom of speech. You know, I remember back when I was a young boy, free speech was in. It was hip. The ability for people to demonstrate, to express themselves. The universities and colleges, those were called the open marketplace of ideas. Boy, have things changed. Yet, the First Amendment is still the First Amendment. And the most solid part, most popular part of the First Amendment is still the free speech clause, where it says Congress shall make no law abridging free speech here in the United States. Well, guess what? It's not just Congress that has that authority, or it's not just Congress that's bound by the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has actually extended that to all aspects of government, not just the federal government, but also state governments, local governments, school boards. Wherever their government is, the free speech, First Amendment protections exist. And it's so important for us to remember that, because in our society today, the fact is, free speech is being trampled on. Take, for example, universities, colleges. In the past, we would have people demonstrate, and we'd have other people demonstrate, and they would respect each other's First Amendment rights to free speech. Not anymore. Universities and colleges have become something that we would have seen maybe out of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, where you have massive anti-Semitic, anti-Jew riots, mobs, even professors punishing, harassing kids because of their beliefs, because of their perspective. And when you group free speech with the free exercise of religion, that is religious speech and expression, the assault becomes even worse. The attack becomes even worse. And yet, ironically, the constitutional protection is even stronger, because free speech is a part of the First Amendment, but the free exercise of religion is a separate clause in the First Amendment. So you have double bang, if you will, double protection for speech and the free exercise of religion when it comes to religious speech. And yet, it is under attack, whether you're talking about Jewish students or Christian students with a biblical worldview. That's what we're facing here today. And yet, by God's grace, we still have our Constitution. We still have our First Amendment. We still have the freedom of speech. And we at Pacific Justice Institute, we stand ready to defend your religious speech, your speech communicating your convictions to make a difference in a world that needs it now more than ever. Now, we at the Pacific Justice Institute, we work hard to defend your right to express your values, your beliefs, your convictions. And we do this with a network of attorneys and offices all across the country. We have 36 offices coast to coast to do this work without charge. But we also like to highlight and assist and come alongside those who are also encouraging free speech, free thought, especially fighting efforts of censorship. We'd like to bring on now Sean Semenko, who is the CEO of Uncensored America. Welcome to the show, Sean. Now, for those of you who may not be aware of them, they are an organization committed to promoting free speech and doing so in a fun way, allowing students to express themselves and to feel comfortable expressing themselves in a society where there's so much censorship for speech that doesn't fall in a very narrow-minded, politically correct viewpoint or perspective. So, Sean, welcome to the program. Tell me, what drove you to start this organization, Uncensored America? Was there anything in particular that inspired you to do that?
Yeah, it was the massive wave we saw of cancellation and censorship of people on social media and in public life who I and many people believe were wrongly canceled and censored. This was during 2015 from 2020, this was all going on. We didn't even know what the term cancel culture was before that time, but during that time, you had people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin McInnes, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, and then eventually the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, who were being censored and canceled on all these platforms, like at the time Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere in public life too. Like if you'd associate with these people, you'd have your lives destroyed or people would come after you. And I knew that that was wrong. That's not how this country has worked. I didn't grow up in a country like that. My parents didn't either. So I knew that something needed to be done. And it was the biggest threat to free speech. And you could see on college campuses too, people were getting shut down for having speeches that went against what most people on campuses thought. And a good example was Milo too. When he went to Berkeley in 2017, they rioted and got the event shut down. So when you see stuff like that, it's just ridiculous, and it's not free speech. It's just censorship. And the only way you're going to fight against that is if you host the people who are actually censored and canceled. So with our organization, we prioritize those people and we give them a platform and we give students a chance to hear them and other people the chance to hear them, talk to them, and engage with them. Because when you remove them from the conversation, you can't actually have a conversation with all voices or people you disagree with, and you don't understand what they actually believe. If you actually talk to these people, you would know what they believe, and you would be able to have a conversation, maybe change their minds, or maybe they change yours. And that's what this country's always been about, and that's what the First Amendment's about.
Now, you mentioned universities punishing students because of their differing opinions. Can you give us some examples of what you've actually observed happening on college or university campuses?
Well, it's something that I've even experienced firsthand when I was a college student at Penn State. I remember I was in it was a writing class, English class, and we did a thing on, it was like right after the inauguration, we had to write something about the women's rights movement from the suffrage era, and then also the Women's March that was happening just at that time a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C. And I tried to make these comparisons as how, well, the suffrage movement was doing things that made sense, and they were doing it optically, they were doing it in a smart way, because they would have parades with like beautiful women and showing women's strength and all their beautiful femininity and things that they've done. Whereas the Women's March was having Madonna saying we should blow up the White House. Like, it was the completely opposite thing, and people were wearing like costumes of genitals and whatnot. So I made this pretty much like objective, sensible comparison anybody could see. And she took points off and gave me a bad grade. I wrote this whole page as like what I did wrong. And I was like, you hear all these stories of these things happening and you kind of wonder, like, is it really that big of a deal? It is. It happened to me. It happens to everybody every day. Um, and it's something that I think I'd be curious to see what it's going to be like this semester with Trump in power and all these new rules now of free speech on campuses and stuff like that. But the best way I found to fight it is simply there's two options you can take. You can either do something like I did and you're completely innocent. You have a case, you fight it with the school, you fight it with the professor, you go to resources like FIRE, who can help you out with this sort of stuff. Or, and I hate to say it, but it is an option, you just keep your mouth shut, you work your way up into a company or organization, and then you exert free speech policies that way. I think that's what some people have been doing with some major companies where, and I think Elon Musk is kind of like an accidental example of this because I think he's always believed in these things. Obviously, his opinions have evolved and he's changed, but he's somebody that worked his way up, and then once he got power, once he had influence, then he could, in his company and other places, push the policies and the beliefs that he wanted and have a ripple effect that way. But that's why I think things like our organization are important, because they give people space to actually express themselves and see these things and understand different people. So it gives them a space to do that. That's another way to fight is you can start your own club or something like on a campus or chapter of ours or another organization. But I think it's critical that people understand that there's many ways you can go about this, and sometimes I know it sounds like it's going against what I'm saying, but it's really not. There's some times where the fight's worth having, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you gotta let the fight our day, because sometimes it's just not worth, saying something like super edgy in front of a professor in like the name of free speech, and then like you're expelled from the university. It's like, well, that's not really like gaining anything for anybody. But there's like tactful ways you can do it. There's as long as Yeah, as long as you can back up what you say and as long as you are reasonable, like you're gonna basically be fine. That's what I've learned.
What advice would you give young people who are afraid to share their opinions in the world we have today?
In general, I tell people just don't be afraid to voice your opinion. I think the biggest problem that we've had over the past not just 10 years, but like 20 years is that people are just too afraid to speak their opinion. And so, like, things that are normal, that are important to be talked about, just become suppressed and they become taboo and weird, even though they're the most normal things. Like when you go, like, hey, maybe we should let everybody have a right free speech. And it's like, if you don't get up there and say those things, like, people are that sort of thing is going to become less normal and it's going to become weird, even though it isn't. So I think it's important for people to speak up when they can. At the same time, I think people need to also be very informed, be very knowledgeable about what they're talking about, so that when you do get challenged, because you will, and you should be, and everybody should be get challenged, you will be able to back yourself up, and you'll be able to be the most reasonable, sensible voice in the room. Um, and at the same time, there's a time and place for it. Like, sometimes, this it's not the place to fight these sort of things. But I'd say in most cases, like, you should go for it. You should um, not be afraid to stand up for yourself. I think the problem we've had for so long is that people are afraid to fight these fights. And I encourage people to get involved with other people around the universities with things like what we're doing so that they can have conversations, they can do all this stuff. Like if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see that we have countless debates, countless speeches that hundreds of people have come out to because people want to have these conversations, they want to engage. And I encourage people to do that, like engage with these things. Don't let people have some sort of, event that you think is crazy and just do nothing about it. If you don't like it, protest it. If you want to talk to people there, talk to people there. If you want to ask a question, do that. I just want people to engage more. I think the more we engage, that's the way we like get through our problems as a culture and a society. It's how you're gonna actually find solutions to things rather than just sitting back and doing nothing. But at the same time, like I said, you know, some people tell me like all the time that they want to sort of like make this sort of big spectacle for free speech where they do something like really crazy. They invite somebody that's like really out there. And I'm like, you can do that, but you gotta know the consequences because these things still do have consequences. Best place to find us is on YouTube. That's our big home. We have almost 100,000 subscribers. We're like just about to cross 95,000. So that's where all of our people are at. YouTube.com/at Uncensored America. And you can also find us on X at Uncensored AM and Instagram at Uncensored AM as well. Check out all of our speeches, debates with all kinds of different people. It's a lot of fun, even stuff that, like we just did 2 debates before the 2024 election with Trump versus Kamala with Destiny and Owen Shore. That's been really popping off. A lot of people have been loving that one. So if you love seeing your favorite like online influencers duke it out, like check out our debates. And if you love having just sort of interesting conversations about controversial topics or topics that aren't talked about a lot, the speeches are great for that too. So hope everybody checks them out because they're a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Sean, for the work you're doing. And, if we at Pacific Justice Institute can ever help you or any students you're working with, just give us a call. Well, folks, oftentimes when your free speech rights are under attack, you don't have a lot of time to respond. So I've got a recommendation for you. Go to our website, pji.org, pji.org, and sign up to get our free e-newsletter called The Legal Insider. It will give you updates on our cases, what we're doing out there. It'll also educate you about challenges to free speech rights and the free exercise of religion, as well as what you can do about it and how you can, bit by bit, become aware and sensitized to your rights, what to do, what not to do, and also to be reminded that we at PJI, we're here. We've got your back, and we do so with joy and always without charge.
Today's Faith and Law episode is focusing on the First Amendment. And let's get to some breaking news. Again, TikTok back in the news as our most favorite and most popular social media app. Of course, we know it is Singaporean owned or Chinese owned through the company ByteDance. And it's been in the news a lot lately because there has been a ban implemented on it. And why is this so important, and why are we talking so much about it? Well, it is an absolutely important, key, integral part of the broader discussion of our First Amendment rights through the Constitution. So TikTok is our favorite app right now. There are over 170 million American users on it. The problem is, in this country, we don't really take too kindly to foreign countries, especially foreign countries who may or may not want to do us harm here in the United States, having access to so much of our data and really just having access to messaging so many Americans in this way. What TikTok through ByteDance has done so brilliantly is they've created this algorithm that cannot be replicated. So you might say, well, if TikTok's so beloved here in the United States, why doesn't someone just replicate it? Why doesn't Elon Musk, he already has a social media app, X, that's very popular. Why don't we just recreate a TikTok-like app? And we can't do it. The algorithm is brilliant, and we've seen through Instagram Reels and other attempts that that's just not happening. So Donald Trump, in one of his first executive orders, has paused the ban on TikTok for 90 days. We want to be able to exercise our First Amendment right to free speech. We just want to make sure that we do it in a way that's safe for Americans, especially when it comes to China. So what's most likely going to happen is this app will get shopped to hopefully an American buyer. Trump has said that he wants to ensure that at least 50% of TikTok is American owned. Now, the reason he didn't do all of this during his first term was that Oracle, which is a Texas-based iCloud storage type company, was holding all of the data there in Texas during his first term, which kind of solved a lot of this data and exposure issue for us the first time. So here we are again, we'll see what happens, but it just reinforces why protecting our First Amendment rights, but also our privacy and our data is so important. And one of the really interesting shifts that we have seen with this discussion is that a lot of particularly Gen Z and younger Americans who love TikTok and don't want to see it go away, they're content creators, they make money through TikTok, we get a lot of our news and information, and honestly, it's just really creative and fun. They said, hey, we're willing to sacrifice our personal data so that we can keep the app. And another interesting thing that they commented on was that, you know what, we feel like our own US government is taking that information regardless, so why does it matter if a foreign nation is doing it as well? The Trump administration is going absolutely gangbusters with these executive orders. Caroline Leavitt, who is the press secretary, has really promoted the First Amendment and free speech as kind of a main tenet of this administration. She is really opening up the press briefing room to new media, influencers, podcasts, and we love to see it. There are executive orders left, right, and center, just making sure that our freedoms are protected. And it's really great to see that this one has been promoted to be preserved so much. What we're also seeing that's interesting on this breaking news front is a lot of lawsuits coming out of the administration against news outlets, individuals, and organizations who have really violated or potentially violated free speech in sharing things that are untruthful, and potentially slanderous or defamatory. So The View has gotten sued a couple of times already, and some other organizations, CBS, over the interview with Kamala Harris. And so we will see how that turns out, but it's a new day in regard to the First Amendment. And what we're seeing is no longer are the days of the Biden administration where anyone can say anything and then just add the term alleged on the end of it. It actually has to have been alleged for that to be legally effective and binding. And as we know, New York Times v. Sullivan in the 70s was a landmark case that really gave us truth as the marker for what legally can be considered free speech. Another executive order that we're seeing coming out from Trump is just a reaffirmation that we're not going to tolerate any anti-Semitism that crosses that line of truthfulness into harassment or harm. And so just the other day, he signed an executive order to reaffirm one already standing in asking federal agencies to take a look at any complaints or reports that have come out, especially higher education institutions, that were reports of instances of anti-Semitism that could be harmful. So again, it's a new day here in America with regard to protecting our freedoms, protecting our speech, but also making sure that that speech doesn't cross a line, a legal line, into where it could potentially harm, slander, or defame someone. There's a reason that this is included in our First Amendment rights. The freedom to say what we please. This is why the founders of this nation risked everything to leave a country that was disallowing them from saying anything that went against the government. Again, we've just come out of a time in which we have felt like we have not been able to speak freely. But those days are over, and we are looking forward to a new day. So what's going to happen on the social media front? We've also seen social media company owners like Meta's owner Mark Zuckerberg release a statement saying that he is no longer going to be employing fact checkers, that he will rely on community notes, and that his platforms are going to be places where we can express ourselves freely again. Time will tell to see if that is actually going to happen. But the best thing that we can do is continue to rely on the truth that we know is real and accurate. That's biblical, godly truth. Keep speaking out, keep utilizing the platforms, and also keep communicating our wishes, our thoughts, our feelings as men and women of faith, which is so critical to do. Now's the time to do it. Brad loves to say we have this whole new slew and new crop of judges coming in. Our legal system is getting cleaned out and is here to protect those amendments and our constitutional rights to free speech. So that is what I will leave you with, is that things are changing, but they're changing in a right direction. It's not going to happen overnight, and we have our part to do in continuing to speak truth. But we live in this amazing country that gives us the right to do it. So I encourage you all to keep speaking up, speaking out, and speaking truth. And as always, make sure you're following at Pacific Justice Institute, and so you don't miss any Faith and Law or any of the other great programs and resources that PJI offers.
Now, let's take a look at God's Word and the biblical perspective of telling the truth or being silent and acquiescing. Amos chapter 5, verse 10, it says, quote, "There are those who hate the one who upholds justice in court and detests the one who tells the truth." Bottom line, there's always going to be people out there that are going to object to you sharing truth, whether it's in terms of justice and calling out criminal activity, illegal activity, or those committing illegal activity, or you just sharing the truth, the gospel, the hope that is within you. That's the fact of life. The darkness does not like the light. Neither do those who are living lies like it when they're exposed to the truth, convicting them of the lies that they're choosing to live. So much of America today is divergent from Christianity and even Judeo-Christian principles of truth. They're going their own way, and they see that truth as an enemy. We talk about hate speech. I see so much hate speech coming from those who want to silence speech, who want to silence Christian speech, Judeo-Christian perspectives and philosophies and ideas. And it's because I believe they're convicted of the truth. Well, we cannot ever allow that to silence us, folks. We've got to speak up. The love of Christ compels us to do nothing less. Because if we don't speak up, number one, these people will continue to live in darkness. Where is their repentance? Where is their salvation unless they hear the gospel? Unless they hear and see the hope that is within you. Not the perfection that's within you, because we all have a long way to go, myself included. But the hope and the truth of Christ in you, and His forgiveness and His salvation and His sanctification and transformation that's possible through faith in Christ. This is the day for us to speak up all the louder. And to do so, of course, in love. Because if we don't have love as a part of our messaging, sometimes that truth can sort of not be the most effective, much less absorbed and listened to. So just take that to heart. So I want to do those 3 principles.
Yes.
So 3 principles to take away from today's talk. First, stand for justice, even when it's not popular, when it's unpopular. Stand for justice. We've got to live with ourselves. And it's not fun to look back in our life and say, you know what, I should have, I could have, when instead we went ahead and did what was right. And we stood up for truth. We stood up for justice. Number two, be a solid truth teller with integrity. Tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. We've all heard that. But it's true. Give the truth and don't exaggerate. Don't pontificate. Don't use it in a manner that's just partially the truth. No. Give the truth and give it in love. And let it be salt. Let it be for positive and not for tearing down. Number three, support others who uphold justice. I will tell you point blank, sometimes our attorneys out there feel like they're going it alone. Sometimes I've felt at times that I was going it alone. But you know what? We went ahead and we stood up for truth. We stood up for those who are being oppressed. We stood up for churches being shut down. We stood up for families who are wrongfully having their children taken from them. We stand up for truth. And I will tell you, it means so much when we know there's people out there like you that are standing with us, whether supporting our work financially or prayerfully, interceding for us, or appearing with us, appearing in the courtroom to be there for moral support, or at a press conference, or inviting us to speak at your church or your group or your political gathering. Whatever it takes, that means a lot to us. So stand up for organizations like Pacific Justice Institute and others that are standing up for truth. Make sure they're not standing up alone. So folks, there's going to be challenges out there. There's going to be all kinds of efforts to silence you. But remember this, no matter what the challenge, always, always keep the faith.